Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
I was reading Kerry's thing, and I was by the end, I was like dizzy. And
It's a lot of information.
a lot of information to process, but
It's good though.
I'm like, holy God, I had to read it in parts.
Break it down.
Yeah. I had to take a break. Meeting of the South Hunter Regional Board of Education is called to order. Adequate notice is required by the Open Public Meetings Act, was provided on December 10th, 2020 by posting a notice with the respective clerks of the City of Lambertville, Borough of Stockton, and Township of West Stanwell, and advertised on December 3rd, 2020 in the Hunterdon County Democrat and Trenton Times newspaper. Everyone please stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Roll call. Roll call. Lauren Brunstrom Fellows.
Here.
Martha Dennis. Here. Jim Gallagher.
Here.
Chris Petrucci.
Here.
Diana Purcell.
Here.
Lonnie Todd Marino.
Here.
Megan Warner.
Here.
Philomena Hicks.
Here.
Kevin Kowaleski.
Here. All right, we're going to move to PTO, PTA, and LAF update. We'll start with the PTO. If there's anybody from the PTO that would like to give an update.
Hi, Jessica Hunterdon, West Stanwell PTO. Last month we had our 50-50 drawing. It was really, really successful. We got $2,000 for our winners, the Romberger family, and $2,000 to cover our field day t-shirt expenses. We like to have a rainbow, and we thought that it was important that we provide t-shirts for every student in the school, so this completely covers the cost of that, which is amazing. Trunk or treat was really successful. We had tons of people that came last minute at the door, even though we had to change it to Sunday, but it was really lovely. All of our families had a great time. Upcoming stuff, we have holiday shop. The kids send in money ahead of time, then we pull them out one by one and they get to shop, and then the stuff gets delivered to the school at a later date. And they're able to get stuff for their family members, and they really enjoy something they really enjoy, and we really enjoy it too. We do not have a meeting in December. Our next meeting is January 10th at 7:30. I encourage anyone who isn't already a West Stanwell PTO member to join. It's a great organization. Thank you.
All right, LAEF. Anybody from LAEF?
Hi, everybody. Erin McManus-Keys. I'm here tonight for Janelle. Just wanted to update you. First of all, we wanted to thank everybody for their participation in Golf Day. It was a huge success. Letter rating campaign just started. If you haven't gotten them, you will be getting them soon. And we awarded our first grant this year. We're going to fund a large range of books for the libraries focused on diversity. That's it.
Thank you.
And then I actually have the PTA update, so I'll read it. First, the PTA, working with Student Council and Fisherman's Mark, is sponsoring a toy drive for local children from November 29th through December 16th. We are asking for new unwrapped toys and books for ages 12 and younger, or gift cards to places like GameStop and Kohl's for ages 13 to 17. There will be 5 donation sites: LPS, Lambertville Academy, Lambertville Public Library, Music Mountain Theater, Alcal, and Union Coffee. Our 6th graders are promoting a couple of fundraisers for their class trip. First, through the Got Sneakers program, they're asking for people to donate sneakers, old, new, or anywhere in between, to LPS. Sneakers that cannot be reused will be repurposed into playgrounds and other surfaces. Second, they are selling butter braid pastries. You can order sweet and savory pastries, which will be delivered frozen on December 8th. This is a great online fundraiser for the holiday season. Contact lpspta2@gmail.com for more information. And then finally, the PTA is sponsoring an Eyes of the Wild outdoor assembly on Wednesday, and which we hope will be a big treat for our students.
Moving on to correspondence.
Which is posted for
Posted where they're
obviously
posted.
anyone to see. No, I'm gonna do my review first,
Oh,
but we
okay.
have to do approval of the minutes. first.
No, I didn't know if you're reading the one we
Oh,
have to
gotcha,
read.
yeah.
All right, need to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second.
Lauren, was second?
Any discussion on A and B? Andrew, roll call.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes.
All right, moving on to the report of the superintendent.
All right, so just a brief report for me this evening. So wanted to start out just with an update. So if you've been following along with our COVID tracker, and obviously you've been following along with some of my emails of late, we have had an uptick in COVID cases throughout the district. So one of the things that we really took a look at and took a step back in the last couple of weeks was just to kind of, again, reevaluate our protocols and where we are in each one of our buildings. Just to remind, all of our folks, staff, students, that, we need to maintain our social distancing, cleaning practices. As much as we all would like to put this behind us and kind of get back to normal, it just reminds us that we're not there yet. So we did take advantage of the last couple of weeks to kind of just regroup a bit and put some other protocols in place just to make sure that we're in a good place as far as our cases. I also wanted to and I've put it here on the tracker, just a reminder to parents that if a child does test positive, they should email two people. They should email the school nurse at your building and the building principal. That's really important, especially on weekends, just to make sure that we get that information so we're prepared for Monday. Sometimes, obviously, if you email other folks, if they're not checking their email over the weekend, we wouldn't have that information. That's really important. I also had sent out recently kind of a contact tracing tree or a diagram that shows you the process that we go through. That's also posted on our website as well. You can see that when we do get information of cases and how we contact trace and how we make our decisions as far as quarantining, which is really our nurses, again, just to reiterate, doing an amazing job with all the other normal things they do on a daily basis, dealing with this as well and doing all the contact tracing and talking to staff, calling parents, and going through that whole process has not been easy for them. So I just sent out at about 6 p.m. tonight. You may not have seen it already. It's that time of the year. Someone had just mentioned to me that we've already had some flurries today because it is pretty cold outside. So I did just want to share information, the decision-making process that I utilize if for some reason we're going to need to either delay and close school. This year would be a little different because we would be back to possibly a delay. Last year we really didn't go down that road because we were doing modified school days, right, with our times, but that could be in play for this year. The one thing that I do want to let folks know is that the Department of Education has made the decision that there's only really one situation where we would go to virtual days that could possibly count towards the 180 that we're required to do. If there is some type of either health emergency or weather emergency or something that causes us to be closed for more than 3 consecutive days, and that's actually one of our policies that we looked at tonight in our policy committee, we do have the ability then to go to remote or virtual instruction and count those days towards our 180, but only if it's more than 3 consecutive days. So what that means is we're kind of back to our traditional snow days, right? Where if we do need to close down, it will be a traditional snow day. The kids will be happy because they can go out and play in the snow and not have to worry about getting online. But also just a reminder that we did use 2 of our 3 days that we built into the calendar already because obviously we had to shut down the beginning of the year with Hurricane Ida. So the email that I sent out this evening had a link on there or a PDF of our most updated calendar. So make sure you check that out, and then hopefully we won't have to worry about it. But if we do, then we'll adjust accordingly throughout the year. And then the last thing I just want to provide an update on is the referendum. So obviously November 2nd was a big important day, and this is where the results stand as we speak this evening. You can kind of see the breakdown. I will let you know that on Friday evening, we did have a group of citizens that have filed a petition for a recount and a recheck of the votes. And from what I'm being told, that will take place at some point the week after Thanksgiving, so some point next week, where there will be a recount of the votes. So that's where we are. Depending upon how that goes, then I'll have more information to share at our December meeting. Any questions from the board? All right. So we also have another presentation this evening. We're fortunate to welcome back Mr. Hewitt, who is our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, who was with us last month for a presentation, and now he's back again this month to talk about some assessment data for the fall. So Mr. Hewitt, welcome.
Great, thank you. And good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Hewitt. I'm the Director of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction, as Mr. Suso had mentioned. This past fall, in 2021, we had done a survey of assessments throughout our student body from 4th grade through 12th grade. So I'll get into some details about that. The name of the assessment was the Start Strong Assessment, and basically these are standardized assessments done and put out through the New Jersey Department of Education. And this is a slide directly from some of the training that I had gone to, as this is a new assessment in New Jersey. And it came directly from the Department of Ed. Just reiterating, letting us know that basically the assessment was something to determine where our students were coming back to us from academically as a result of being out of school for the pandemic or having interrupted school as a result of the pandemic. And you'll notice that it was information that, unlike other state testing that we've undergone, gave us results relatively quickly. Here we are in November, and I'm here already reporting out results that are not even, that we just finished about a month ago, actually today. One of the things they wanted to make sure that we realized is that these assessments do not replace other standardized assessments that we do in the district, particularly our local benchmark assessments that we do district-wide. And they also do not replace the upcoming New Jersey Student Learning Assessments, which will take place in the spring. They will still be a requirement for the tested grade levels. Basically, the purpose of these assessments in the fall took the place of last spring's assessments. So basically, you'll see the results in English, math, and science as a result of these fall assessments. So who and what was assessed? Basically, everybody in grades 4th through 12th grade were primarily assessed. You'll see the grade levels specifically there for each of the content areas, as well as the courses too when it comes to math, algebra 1, algebra 2, and geometry. It's not grade level specific for those areas, it's class specific for those areas. I did want to just kind of point out too, in one of the documents that I received from the state around Start Strong, they wanted to, also that I thought highlighted it pretty well. A couple of things is that we want to make sure that we realize that these tests should be used in concert with other indicators of student knowledge, skills, and abilities to evaluate performance. And that's where our benchmarks come into play. So these are really just one piece of data that we use. And in addition to that, that these are not intended to predict student performance on future summative assessments. So when we look at these assessment results, our goal is not to say, oh, this is how we expect our students to do come the spring when our New Jersey Student Learning Assessments are administered, but rather just to give us information now on how to plan instruction to make sure we're filling in any gaps that may have occurred as a result of disrupted instruction due to the pandemic. I know this is kind of small, but basically the point of this slide, and this will be posted on our website, it's actually already a link in our agenda for tonight. But basically this slide shows what grade level students were in and what assessments or what standards they would have been assessed on. So if a student was in 4th grade this year, in the fall when the Start Strong was administered, they were taking tests that tested 3rd grade standards, so the previous year's standards, for both ELA and math. And then it shows you that all the way through. The part that looks a little bit more confusing is in math, once you get up to grade 9 and beyond. So that's where it switches to course levels. So if a student was in Algebra 1, for example, in 8th grade or 9th grade, regardless of the grade level that they were in, students that were currently enrolled in Algebra 1 this fall would have been assessed in grade 8 math content. And similarly for geometry, since the sequencing of some of our math courses are different throughout the state. Some districts go Algebra 1, Algebra 2 geometry as we do, others go Algebra 1 geometry and then Algebra 2. So depending, both Algebra 1 and geometry students currently enrolled were tested in grade 8 standards in math. Oh, you know what I wanted to mention too? In science, you'll notice that it's not just that grade level. So for example, in this, our 6th graders currently were tested in grades 3, 4, and 5 for their science content. So although they're currently 6th graders, they're being tested on the previous 3 years of science classes and content that they were delivered. And the same with our 9th grade students being tested in their middle school science class material. And our 12th graders were tested on their high school science content material. So this is just a lot of numbers, but just to kind of give you an overview of about how many students we're testing, I think it's important to note here when you look at results by grade level, when you look at 4th grade, that's obviously 4th grade for both Lambertville and West Amwell. So when you look at 4th grade at 46, that may sound like a lot of students, but it's a small sample size when you start talking about data. So students in each grade level count for, in many cases, in some cases, a larger percentage of overall results. So one student could count up to as high as 4.5 percentage points when you look at percentages based on the size of our classes, particularly 4.5% when you look at just one class in one of our elementary schools, where the numbers are even smaller. So the assessments took place in October, and they did actually end just 1 month ago today. And it was primarily done during instructional periods or blocks up here at the middle school, high school. So in other words, students took their tests when they typically would have that subject area within their school day. When we do New Jersey student learning assessments, we typically assess students in the mornings and revamp the schedules in each building to make sure that they're tested in the morning for those larger chunks of time. But because these tests were just brief kind of snippets of content area and standards, we were able to fit them into periods and blocks that the students are scheduled for and didn't have to revamp and disrupt the entire school schedule for the assessments. Performance levels look a little bit different. Performance levels are basically how the tests were scored. So there were 3 levels. The lowest level is indicated at the bottom there, that last bullet, strong support needed. And the highest level that you could score is indicated by less support needed. And then average students in the middle scored some support needed was the name of the performance level there. So here's our summary of data throughout the entire district. So when we're looking at ELA, math, and science, we're looking at all of our students 4th grade through 12th grade. And what you see in the darker parts at the top is where you see less support needed, the middle some support, and the bottom strong support. And basically you see that at the key at the bottom, but I know it's hard to read. So as we look at this just as a district overall, you can see our stronger areas, ELA, and areas where we need to do some work is in math and in science. There are lower scoring areas as a whole district. Then I put it in here by school. So you'll notice LPS's summary, again, by the 3 content areas, broken down the same way. And basically we're looking at the mid-level color and the top-level color kind of combined to look at our mid and high-level achievers. And then the same for West Amwell here. And then the middle school, high school, again, for all students in this building that were assessed in ELA, math, and science. One thing that I found interesting between all 3 buildings is that in each of the 3 buildings, we saw consistency, whereas ELA was the highest scoring area, math the lowest scoring area, and science somewhere in the middle. So it was interesting to see the consistency between Lambertville and West Amwell particularly, because over the years, this was one of our goals through regionalization to build some consistency between our 2 elementary schools in preparation for the middle school, high school. And it's nice to see, although we can't compare these scores necessarily to other standardized tests to see improvement, we can look to see and notice that there is consistency between the buildings, which is great. ELA data by school and grade level. So in this slide, you'll see all of the ELA grades that were tested and the percentage of students that scored in each of the 3 different ranges or performance levels at each of the buildings. And then for LPS and West Amwell combined, you'll see at the end the South Hunterdon Regional School District overall total for those grade levels, whereas you won't see that for 7th through 10th, obviously, because we're one building, and so those would be the same numbers in that column. Again, math broken down by percentages and grade levels. And then science by percentages and grade levels as well. So I will say too that in some cases, we had like our largest group, I'm just looking at ELA in my notes here. ELA 10th grade, we had 71 students test. That's our largest testing group in ELA. And so when I broke that down by percentage points, each student would be associated with 1.4% of the overall percentage scores, whereas our smallest group at LPS with 22 students testing, every student in that group would count 4.5% of that overall score, or percentage points in those scores. So I think that's really important to note, just in that when we look at our numbers, because our numbers are so small, but also so varied within those small numbers, the percentage points can somewhat be deceiving, but when we look at the numbers of less, some, and strong support needed, that's the area that can really guide us in our planning moving forward. Then we're also required to break out our test results based on different groups of students. So we do break it out by socioeconomic status. And you'll notice again, now this is all by entire district. So when we look at our ELA district numbers, our math district numbers, and our science district numbers from 4th grade all the way through 12th grade, you'll see the overall percentage points. And this is one thing that is an area that we recognize that we want to work to build equity, and it ties into our equity goal when we look at socioeconomic status of students within our districts. And we see a disparity between our economically disadvantaged students and our non-economically disadvantaged students. So this is the kind of data that we look at when we talk about equity. We also look at ethnicity or race, and you'll see a breakdown here. I know these numbers are very small, but I can tell you that the first row is identifying Black and African American percentages. The second is Hispanic or Latino. The third is white, and the 4th column is 2 or more races. And you will notice that in I'm just looking at ELA, for example, at the white category in less support needed, it's about 50% of our students. And we look at the other ethnicities, and we see students at that same level at about 25% at less support needed. So again, we see a disparity, and again, this speaks to the equity work that we're looking to work on in our district. And then I broke it out by gender. Same thing, all of the students, male, female, throughout the district, 4th through 12th grade. And you can see in ELA, very similar scores. Math, you notice a slight difference. Male's a little bit higher in the math area. And science, again, very similar, I mean, almost identical in those 2 areas as far as gender goes, based on looking at less support needed. So how do we use this data? Basically, the whole point of this data is to guide instruction. It's like benchmarks or pre-assessments for us to determine, based on the pandemic and what our students experienced last year, where are the gaps that we need to focus our instruction. And one thing that our data does through this system, which is it's called TestNav. It's Pearson Access Next that actually, it's all done online. And through the system, we're able to drill down and see the actual questions that were asked, the standards that those questions were aligned to, and how our students performed. So that's really useful data. Granted, there's not a lot of questions in any one subject area. However, the questions that are there are directly aligned to the standards and can show us exactly where we need to focus instruction for this group of students based on the experience they had last school year during the pandemic and that allows us to guide instruction to help both fill those gaps and also continue moving forward. It does not mean that we would go back and teach third grade standards this year to fourth grade only because maybe that's where they left off. We, of course, want to continue our students moving, continue to deliver the fourth grade standards, and fill in the gaps of third grade standards when needed. But you'll see that I've listed here some things that we've done just over these last couple of months as we've come back to school through different grade level meetings, department meetings, planning instruction based on this assessment. And really that second bullet is the type of reports that this Pearson Access Next system gives us, allowing us to look at question by question and standard by standard. I think it's also important to notice, and I guess I'm jumping around because I'm going back to the first bullet now, but with that first bullet, that there is no other data to compare our scores to. We can't compare them to ourselves because we didn't have Start Strong before now, so this is a baseline if we were to look to try to compare data moving forward and show progress. And we do not have access to state averages or other district averages or things like that. So this is really one glimpse in time and truly meant, like the state told us, to be used to guide instruction and to use it along with our benchmark data and assessments that we've also given, and so that we can kind of put it all together and design programs accordingly. So as far as the results from here, we received the individual student reports, and we will be making sure that those hard copies get mailed out to families after they are mailed to us, obviously. So we'll get them in December, and then we will be able to mail them out and home before winter break to families to see the actual results of your children, the students in the district. Questions from the board?
Jeff,
Yes.
could you speak just a little bit to the ways in which the data is showing us some of the results of the investment we made in ELA, curricular support, over the last 5 to 7 years?
Absolutely. I think if I just go back to the ELA, I guess the overall summaries, and when we look at this, basically in that mid to upper range, we have 67% of students hitting those mid to upper level scores versus our math and science, where it is a little bit lower. I did want to also note in those areas, I think coming off of a pandemic, math and science are much more hands-on type subject areas, and they require manipulatives, experiments, and things like that that students really did not have access to over the last couple of years based on the pandemic. But in addition to that, I think that this speaks largely to the results of our regionalization and the results of our ability through regionalization to be able to hire a district reading specialist to really put a focus in our English language arts department at the K2 level, where we really build foundational reading skills through guided reading leveled libraries, guided reading instruction, training all of our staff, kindergarten through third grade, in the Orton-Gillingham strategies, which really focus on more of a multi-sensory type approach to teaching instruction, and getting all the materials to support that, the professional development to support that, having a common language in writing. We've implemented over the last few years too, that now we're starting to see some of the students who have experienced those foundational reading type strategies and instruction reach the grades that are tested by the state requirements. So we're starting to see some of that. So I know this is not an indicator of how students will do on summative assessments in the spring, but I am anxious to see how they do since we haven't had that the last 2 springs. But because those students in those 4th, 5th, 6th grade levels will have the opportunity to test and show what they know now. Did that answer your question?
Jeff, can you just maybe mention about how we've been focusing now on math?
Yes, exactly, yeah. Yes, the glaring area, right? That I think it's obvious to all of us, and that's what these results are meant for, is for us to put a focus in the area of the standards that it looks like we need to focus on, and math is clearly one area that we're looking to focus. And I can say that we've been piloting new program. We've introduced some new programs in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade recently, and we're looking to expand that into the high school levels, and we're currently piloting the elementary level math programs as well to pick those programs that are going to be best meeting the needs of our students that are based on those standards where we need to focus. So, thanks for bringing that up, sorry.
Thank you.
I also think it's interesting to note, when you think about it, our current 3rd, 4th, and even 5th grade, this was the first standardized test that they've taken because of the last 2 springs not having had any standardized testing. So, lots of new things. Other
Thank you, Jeff.
All right,
Great
thank
job.
you.
All right, now brings us to the open public comment section. Just a reminder before we start public comment, we have procedures and requirements that include standards of conduct that need to be followed by members of the public during public comments. If a member of the public becomes disruptive during a public meeting, including during any period for public comment, the member of the board charged with running the public meeting shall warn the disruptive member of the public that continued disruption may result in being prevented from speaking during the public meeting or removed from the public meeting. Destructive conduct includes sustained inappropriate behavior such as, but not necessarily limited to, shouting, interruption, and use of profanity or comments seen as abusive, obscene, or defamatory. Members of the public are invited to address the board on any matter for a maximum of 3 minutes. During this portion, there will be a clock up on the screen, so please wrap up your thoughts starting at 2:45. You're asked to state your name and municipality that you live in, and now the public comment is now open. Anybody like to make public comment, please come up to the podium.
Hi, Jen Batchelor from West Amwell. I have largely stayed on the sidelines publicly throughout the referendum. I felt that it was the right thing to do to allow a fair election to play out. However, I have come to the realization that this election was not completely fair. While I don't believe anyone involved had any bad intentions, I do believe there was a win at all cost mentality at play that, in my opinion, swayed the election outcome. Looking over the type of information shared back in 2016 versus what was shared in 2021, and I can see there are stark differences. It seems that once the board had come to a decision, any and all references to any cons were dropped. And while I can understand that the argument that obviously the board was going to sell the plan they voted for, there are specific laws that govern how a board can go about promoting a referendum. It is not the same as a political candidate race where obviously the candidate running is only going to tell you their best qualities. Unlike a political candidate, the Board of Ed and the budget they control are meant to serve all of the voting taxpayers. In reading the various legal precedents, it has become clear to me that lines have been crossed. Technically, not quite breaking a rule isn't the same as following it to me. Given the additional personal burden that my family will now incur, I am extremely disappointed by the thought that perhaps the outcome would have been different if fair and balanced information, as prescribed by law, was presented to the public. I am asking that moving forward, the Board of Ed recommits to the ethics training all are required to take. Seriously consider the allegations brought in the pending ethics complaint and make changes. At this point, I am very concerned about having to work with the district as a close neighbor through any construction that may happen. And on the other hand, if a new vote is required, I am asking you to carefully reconsider this plan given the scant amount of support for it by West Amwell Township residents. Take it as an opportunity to carefully consider the fact that our student population does not even remotely warrant a plan to build a middle school of this size. Carefully consider the lasting impact COVID and Ida have had on our community. Take into account that the high school has been expanded in part to accommodate middle school students and that we are all still paying for that expansion. Openly and honestly share the information that, in fact, maintaining South in a new single K-6 school would be less expensive in the long run and would not require us to temporarily have to relocate any students. I believe that we have a duty as members of the electorate, as responsible members of society, as parents, to call out impropriety and unfairness. In my home, we don't teach our kids to win at all costs. We have made sure to stress that the win is not nearly as important as playing the game fairly and to the best of your abilities. Thank you.
Hi, Linda Buccigrosi, West Amwell. I'm here to read a statement by Mike Steely, also West Amwell. I have known and respected a number of the Board of Education members for quite some time. They are all good people. However, this year their zeal in passing the referendum crossed legal and ethical lines. The Board of Education are not volunteers. They are elected officials who preside over a $26 million a year budget who failed in their fiduciary duty to taxpayers. This year they chose to illegally manipulate the electorate to force a $33 million referendum question on the district without honestly portraying the major issues with their proposal, alongside with the positives. Nowhere did the board admit that the core tenet of their proposal was to retain a walkable school to appease Save LPS zealots, and they failed to admit the many shortcomings of the LPS site and the new middle school proposal. What is amazing is that despite a 2-month multimedia campaign and full court press by the superintendent, the referendum passed by only 2 votes. The Board of Education's ethical violations in this matter were so egregious that I was forced to file an 18-count complaint with the New Jersey School Ethics Commission against them. That complaint has been reviewed by multiple lawyers who are experts in educational law, who have all stated the complaint is extraordinarily strong. Don't believe for a second the Board of Ed rhetoric that this is fake news on the internet. This is very real, very serious, and there will be repercussions for the board's actions. The Board of Education should be ashamed of their blatant conduct in lying to the voting public over the course of several months, spinning lies over and over again, despite being warned repeatedly that their conduct was unethical and illegal. 72% of West Amwell residents voted against this referendum for a very good reason. In light of the overwhelming evidence that the Board of Education illegally manipulated the electorate in this matter, I call on the board to halt any and all action regarding the referendum and to restart working with the community honestly and transparently to improve our facilities. Finally, I emailed this comment to the BOE last Friday, November 19th, 2021, and I saw it placed into the correspondence section of the agenda on the district website. By Sunday evening, I saw my letter was deleted from the website. How many other letters from taxpayers has the BOE censored? Mike, and that concludes Mike Spieley's statement.
I'll answer that just quickly as a response. The reason why it was deleted because Mr. Spieley also filled out a Google form, which I was going to read before you did. So.
Next, please.
I don't think this is doing much here.
It's for the people at home.
Oh, it's for people at home.
Yes.
I'll try to read loud. I'm Marilee Adams. I live at 161 Rocktown Lambertville Road, right down there. And I have 4 points to make, and it will take about 2.5 minutes, or I get to watch it, I think 2 minutes and 38 seconds. Recent events related to the school referendum concern me greatly, and I'm assuming that this is public record at this point. My first point is about education itself and the deep value I believe we all share about its importance. In that light, I was distressed to discover that currently students at South Hunterdon are underperforming significantly compared to students at North Hunterdon, at least in terms of math. So I was really glad that you addressed that earlier. As an educator and author of a book entitled Teaching That Changes Lives, I want to understand this poor showing, which you explained some, as well as find out how our students are doing in terms of critical thinking and social emotional learning. Also, my guess is that property values may be connected to school ratings, so this issue is especially concerning, and I'm really curious about what the board is doing about these issues. My second point relates to where our focus and money should be invested. Buildings do not raise kids up. Teachers, parents, curricula, and educational resources do. And so I wonder, are we mixing up our educational priorities about what will make the most difference for our students? My third point relates to the unfortunate, confusing, and irresponsible process by which the referendum was sold to members in the community. And it's amazing with all that it passed with only 2 votes. I've read the ethics complaint and personally recognize some of the behaviors that it points to. Anecdotally, I have heard similar reflections from others. One thing that is not adequately addressed in the referendum concerns taxes. My husband and I love it here and plan to be here for a very long time. And we need to understand explicitly how the referendum will impact our tax burden short-term and long-term. And I have to wonder what was wrong with the process and what should be done about it. And finally, I believe that it's inappropriate to consider the passage of fait accompli until these matters are resolved. So I call upon all relevant people and entities to take the same stand, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
It took longer than I thought.
Anybody else like to say?
Hi, Jen Andrioli, West Amwell Township. Congratulations on the passing of the referendum, but I think you need to consider the cost to the community as a whole, and I don't mean just monetary. I've been here about 20 years, and I don't think I've seen our school community quite so divided. Not just West Amwell. West Amwell apparently appears to be pretty unified on the subject of the referendum, whereas the school community as a whole does not. The ethics violation that was filed, the ethics complaint with 18 different counts of violations, is pretty heavy. And those violations need to be considered by all of you. You need to investigate it, you need to make changes, and you need to take action to rebuild that trust with the community. There has been a loss of trust. I also think additionally, given the weight and the severity of this ethics complaint, that you should consider tabling this referendum until that's at least settled, so that we have a final decision on that ethics complaint. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Andrea Little from West Amwell Township. My statement is pretty much at the 13th hour, but I'm reiterating some things I mentioned last time and ran out of time. A, more information regarding traffic study on Mount Airy and Lambertville Rocktown Road. I ask this again. Busing schedules of middle school versus high school, which includes more buses and traffic, because there are 2 schools, 2 different bus routes, timing. When you live off of this road, it's a big consideration. Choice program is part B. As you look to move students to the Jesus School, depending on if this referendum happens, all grades are open currently except for grades 7 and 11 according to the website. As students will be displaced in elementary, I highly recommend an evaluation that there's no choices from K through 6. This will be a financial detriment to our community, but the families that have young children want small instruction, and we do not have a plan that has been communicated regarding how these students will be educated in that space. This vote is divided, and the cost of doing this is detrimental to our community. A district cannot afford nor need 3 schools based on our enrollment, which is less than 900 students within our residencies. Our data suggests it's not energy or sustainable to have 3 buildings, which was part of the original referendum information that you all posted, that was a concern. Having 3 versus 2 buildings is not long-term energy, financially, or in the benefit of our community that's small. And our curriculum also suggests that it is not to our benefit, because we want more going toward our education and our students and our teachers to give the curriculum and the education they deserve. B, instructors are not provided, instruction is not provided at the elementary. The space is going to be limited at Lambertville. There's minimal breakout space. It was mentioned there's only one space that's a breakout space. And according to the referendum data, the square footage versus the state of New Jersey was still not to the liking. 7 years ago, we were one district and we voted for one school to be together. There were two factors. I bring this up again. One was the referendum was supposed to account for our core values as a community and be a financially savings support. And the other was for education. Many yes votes are settling for the yes, and this is at the cost of our residents. I just hope that you'd be wise and listen to all the residents here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, would anybody else like to speak?
Doug Graver, Lambertville. I spoke last time, and I feel the same way. I'm very, very grateful to you all. I've been coming to meetings for the last 7 years about the schools, what to do, what to build. There were 10 options. Nothing came of it. And you all have worked so hard for this referendum, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, close down public participation. There'll be another one at the end for another chance to speak. Moving on to our buildings and grounds. Laura? No one?
Yeah.
Or Diane, I'm sorry.
She was saying. Yes, so we met this past Thursday, and not a ton to highlight. Of course, there's a bus driver shortage going on, I think, nationally at this point. We've had a couple openings now for drivers, so our transportation department's working to creatively handle everything. We just got a new bus, which we ordered, last year. So it finally came in. Stockton update, Stockton School, we're still working to get that officially transferred over to the borough. It's taken some time, and we've, of course, had some obstacles with that. And other than that, a bunch of contracts to approve. And with that, I move items A through G.
Second. Now open for discussion. Any discussion on those items? No? Andrew, roll call.
Martha Dennis. Jim Gallagher.
Yeah.
Trace Patchouli.
Yes.
Diana Purcell.
Yes.
Ronnie Todd Marino.
Yes.
Megan Warner.
Yes.
Laura Brown Stromsons.
Yes.
Philomena Hanks.
Yes.
Kevin Kowalewski.
Yes. All right, Personnel Committee, we did meet. Defer to you.
Yeah, so just a couple things beyond the normal agenda items. Again, just to reiterate what Diane had said, bus drivers and shortages is a challenge in every district right now. We also have been having a few facility challenges. We've had some folks that have been out dealing with a bunch of medical issues. So on our agenda this evening, we've had an open position, part-time position since June that we were able to finally fill. So I'm excited about that to help share some of the responsibilities of facilities. And then the last thing I'll just highlight, so in the past, our administrative unit wasn't actually a unit, it was individual contracts for each individual administrator. They had made the decision last spring that they wanted to, like our other associations, come together as a collective bargaining unit. So they came to the board, and the board approved that request, and the board actually approved back in August a 3-year settlement with our administrators, but there was never actually a collective bargaining agreement because they were never actually a bargaining unit in the past. So what you'll see on the agenda this evening is we actually do have a final bargaining agreement that takes place over the next 3 years, and obviously will continue to be utilized and revised throughout the negotiations process.
All right, need a motion?
So moved. Second.
All right, open for discussion. Anybody have any discussion on the items in personnel?
agenda. I think it's,
Yes.
glad that we're voting on it and that it's going to be in place.
Yeah, well overdue. Absolutely. Andrew, roll call?
Roll call. Starting with Jim.
Yes.
Trace Patchouli.
Yes.
Diana Purcell.
Yes.
Bonnie Todd Marino.
Yes.
Megan Warden.
Yes.
Lauren Brown Strumfeld.
Yes.
Martha Dennis.
Yes.
Philomena Hanks.
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski.
Yes. Curriculum and technology, Laura?
All right. So we have two items up for approval tonight. We did at our last curriculum meeting, we did review documents that relate to general music and arts. And then we also discussed approving curriculum hours for the Elements of Pre-Calculus course. There are a number of student-teacher combinations that were just up for approval in the personnel. And we also looked at some of the information that Jeff had provided and some of the background for the Start Strong testing and how that will be used to inform instructional design and also investment, I think, in different areas that support particularly our students' performance in math and science moving forward, noting, right, how some of the ways in which we have focused on ELA, that those results are really clearly revealed to us in the data. So in using this, right, to think about gaps and coming from interrupted instruction, right, the data does show us the consistency in our ELA approaches, which again was a major result of regionalization, and I think something that really is to be commended, honestly, for seeing over time the district's investment in ELA. So the other, so that's the curriculum that's up for approval, as I said, and kind of some of those relationships. The second thing that's up for approval tonight is an application for preschool education aid, which is being offered by the state. This is an application, so the board, we're officially asking the board to approve this application, but just to explain a little bit, we've had a goal for the curriculum committee to examine the expansion of our pre-K program, recognizing that it's a way not just to orient students and families to the district, but really to start to support our youngest learners so that they can be successful as they move through the grades. And that's really, again, an important work, not just for our community, but also really for families that come into contact with the district through the preschool. So as some of you may have been following, right, free preschool is a movement nationwide, and so the state is beginning to expand. There's an aid formula, so I just want to, because I know there are probably questions about this, but I just want to remark that the program is somewhat flexible in that if our application is approved, and that would be pending on the state, so just to make that clear though, but if our application was approved, we could potentially partner with private preschools in the area who would then be using our curriculum and receiving some of our support around that curriculum so that it would be consistent for students. And I think that's important to note as well, right, because that would be strengthening and supporting the partner preschools. So the goal of the program isn't to like shut those down as much as really to strengthen preschool and to be able to offer it for free for families in the district. So that would include whether they were enrolled and attending physically in our schools or potentially in partner preschools. A staff member would be the coach and coordinator, and that would be covered in the aid again if the application is approved. There's a formula that the state has determined that would figure out how many classrooms, and that is dependent on the number of first grade students. So this is all, again, sort of a preamble, right, to something that may develop, but I wanted to highlight it because it is, we are officially moving tonight to approve that application. And also wanted to frame it, right, in terms of not just our preschool expansion goals, but our equity goals, and I think also the way in which we're hoping, right, to integrate and strengthen our district regionally throughout the grade levels. So those are the two things that are up for approval tonight. And with that, I make a motion to approve items A and B and open some.
And I will second that. Items A and B open for discussion. Anybody have any discussion on those items?
So the aid is to increase the capacity, our capacity, as well as partner with other established.
So the state aid is really about being able to offer free preschool to families. So the delivery of that preschool rate can be somewhat flexible, as far as I understand it, considering the needs and the structures that are already in place. So in our district, right, one of the things that we're looking to do with the referendum and with the bonding is to expand our physical capacity for pre-K. But that there's a formula, right, that basically says 15 students in pre-K grade per classroom, and that the capacity for the district would be calculated based on the first grade census multiplied by 2. So there's like an actual formula there. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does.
May I ask that actually? So one of the, it's a great comprehensive report, is always that one of the elements of that is that if we don't have the space to put 100 or 120 or whatever number of pre-K students in our district, and we work with, say, a preschool that's existing in Lambertville, and the aid would pass through to fund. So we're providing that opportunity to every 4-year-old in our district. Now, if they were to do that, we would be providing them a curriculum. They would not be just sort of flying with whatever they're doing, and I'm sure they're all doing state mandated things. But we would be providing curriculum, we would be overseeing that, so we would be taking on more responsibility. That's correct?
Yeah, and introducing exactly that consistency. So, I think what's most important, right, is is that integration, right, with the curricular support and consistency within the district, as well as the opportunity really for this to be free. Because currently, right, students in preschool, right, as a parent of a kindergartner, we pay whether you're in the district or in private preschool. So this would all again be tuition free, which is important to know as well. But yeah, that Jim is exactly right.
All right, anything else? A roll call, Andrew?
Starting with Tracy Patchouli,
Yes.
Diana Purcell,
Yes.
Lonnie Todd Marina,
Yes.
Megan Warner,
Yes.
Lauren Von Stromfels,
Yes.
Martha Dennis,
Yes.
Jim Gallagher,
Yes.
Philomena Hinks,
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, policy, Jim Gallagher.
Yeah, the policy committee met about an hour and 45 minutes ago, prior to this meeting. We have 2 policies to bring forward tonight for the first reading. I know there's 3 listed on the agenda, but we will not be discussing policy 1648 this evening. Instead, I would like to make a motion to approve for first reading of policy 8600 on student transportation, policy 2425 on the emergency virtual or remote instruction program.
Second.
Thank you. And so the student transportation policy is just a revamping of our existing policy. And the emergency virtual or remote instruction program, as Mr. Suso noted in his report, we are not, the state will not allow us to use virtual days on low snow days unless we have a 3-day-long snowstorm. So it's basically just taking that out. So I encourage you, those both policies be posted, look over them. If you see any concerns or changes, let us know before the next meeting. We will meet before next month's meeting, and we want to put those into effect on the second reading. So just send an email, let me know. Any questions about the policies? If none,
All right, roll call.
ready for vote.
Diana Purcell,
Yes.
Lonnie Todd Marina,
Yes.
Megan Warner,
Yes.
Lauren Von Stromfels,
Yes.
Martha Dennis,
Yes.
Jim Gallagher,
Yes.
Tracy Patchouli,
Yes.
Philomena Hinks,
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski.
Yes.
Motion carries.
School and community, Philomena.
So school and community met on November 16th in person, and we discussed communication, enrollment, and we also discussed referendum questions. So under the heading of communication, we brainstormed a lot of ideas to share with Tony about things that we'd like to see, sharing where students go to college, alumni features, honoring teachers, sharing information about regionalization, sharing information about curricular improvements, and Ronnie also shared some marketing strategy. Tony shared that there was a presentation on diversity, equity, and inclusion to the community that was coming up. Also, the Twitter and Facebook content is now shown on the district website. One thing we've been watching for the last 2 years in this committee is really the improvements to the district website. So it's been great to see those roll out. We also discussed enrollment. The deadline for choice students to apply is December 1st. The committee asked about the seats, and Tony shared that if the seats are not filled, then we lose the seats. Tony will send out a survey to families living in the district but not attending our district to gain insight on their perspective. I also suggested sending out a survey to families of young children to find out what they are looking for in the district as well. I asked Tony to share what the next steps would be in the construction should the referendum pass. He shared that there would be meetings with the bond council and architect or engineer first. He shared that a comprehensive design phase would occur with weekly meetings with various stakeholders, including staff, BOE, students, and community, to create designs for buildings that were as detailed as possible in order to go to bidding. Tony also shared a rough estimate of the timeline. He said that construction would begin fall 2022, and with completion for both projects estimated 2023, a new grade configuration estimated 2024. So from my understanding, Tony will be going into a detailed presentation about this at the next board meeting, but those were some questions that we brought up to ask him should the referendum pass. Nothing to move.
All right. Moving on, routine information items, we need a motion for A and B.
So moved. Second.
All right, A and B are open for discussion.
One question, actually, and this is probably for Andrew. Do we need to have a location on the notice? We say that the meetings, we say when they will be, we don't say where.
We have it in the past.
Okay.
All meetings are at the high school.
Well, that's probably because we alternated where they were going.
Yeah, all meetings are at the high school.
Well, they are now.
That's
For
fine.
now.
So,
I didn't know.
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah.
required to post are just the dates, but we certainly can add a place if you'd like.
Got it.
And we typically post that on the website, I send it out when I lived there, so.
Just want to make sure if it was a legal notice, I just want to make sure that we were complying, if we need to have a location.
Kevin, we have to amend the motion, there's an item C as well for 5 bills. So I'd like to make a motion to approve items A, B, and C. Second.
Now open for discussion. All right, no discussion? All right, roll call.
Starting with Ronnie Todd Marino,
Yes.
Megan Warner,
Yes.
Lauren Brown Schoenfeld,
Yes.
Martha Dennis,
Yes.
Jim Gallagher,
Yes.
Tracy Petruli,
Yes.
Diana Brousseau,
Yes.
Philomena Hanks,
Yes.
Kevin Copeland.
Yes. All right. Good, moving on to public comment, we're moving to the second one, all rules still apply. Still have 3 minutes, timer will be up. Now the second part of public comment is now open. Please, if anyone would like to say anything, come up to the podium. Anybody have anything they'd like to say? All right. Second public participation is now closed. We do have a need to go into executive session tonight. No action will be taken, right?
Nope.
No action will be taken when we come out of executive session. Need a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Voice vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries.
Mr. President, can we have a 5 minute?
5 minutes, 5 minutes, yep, 5 minute recess.
Normal room.
Oh, sorry. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. Everyone have a great night.
Have a great Thanksgiving, everyone.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
8:49, that's not too shabby.
No.
No. I know, right?